You're listening to One Free Family, a new take on peaceful parenting, where you can hear ideas for helping to raise free, independent, and peaceful children. Visit onefreefamily.com to connect and listen. Here are your hosts, James and Taylor Davis.
And we're back with another episode of One Free Family. This is James.
And Taylor.
And we have a very special guest that we're bringing on the phone.
This is not a phone.
1981. We're on Zoom. And we have our good friend, member of the One Free Family Facebook group. And I forgot exactly how you wanted me to introduce your title, Fiona.
We're talking to our friend, Fiona Griffin.
Yeah, go.
She is a licensed mental health therapist and a really, really old and good friend of ours. And she's also a mom herself. And we're so excited to kick off some interviews by talking to Fiona. And I think we're just going to jump right in. And maybe if we want to do any like housekeeping stuff, we can just do it at the end.
I wanted to do more introductory things and mention to everyone that we've actually lived with Fiona on more than one occasion.
We have, lived together multiple times. That's true. Younger.
3 times if you want to count our different working environments. So just hop right in. Fiona, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, maybe your work. Why don't you just get right to it?
Okay. Hi. First of all, I am not really, really old. Our friendship is really, really old. So I just want to clarify that for everyone.
Did he say you were old?
Yeah, one of our
you said are really, really old friends.
No, you're not super old. That's true.
101.
I mean, you are older than me, so.
Oh,
but younger.
Okay. We're gonna go there. Okay, so yes, my name's Fiona. I live in the Burlington, Vermont area with my partner, Nick, and our 2 kids. We have 2 daughters, Anamika, who's 5, and Seda, who is 2. And we are sort of in our first year of homeschooling officially, though we haven't registered yet because kindergarten is optional, but it's the first year, like we're not sending our kid to school, and lots of other people with kids the same age are. We tend towards unschooling. I mean, I think we fully unschool. I don't need to be cagey about it, but yeah, I don't know. What else do you guys want to know?
Well, do you want to hop into like kind of how you arrived at that approach to parenting? Because I know, from talking to you about parenting in the ages ago, when we would discuss things like this, like I guess I was on the surprised end when I found out that you had chosen that sort of path for you and your family. So I'd love to hear, and I think our listeners would like to hear too, because I know a lot of people listening to this show are all over the spectrum in terms of how they approach their parenting. So and
their kids' education.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. So do you want to talk about some major landmarks in that parenting journey that have led you to parent the way you do now?
Yeah, for sure. Well, like James and Taylor said, we have lived near them for a long time. So I think knowing you guys really well and respecting you and trusting you was helpful as we watched you 2 sort of dive into unschooling with your oldest, Oliver, when he was 2-ish, I think is when we first started living together after you guys had kids. So we just spent a lot of time with you guys kind of watching how things were unfolding for you and obviously being in a lot of conversation with you guys. So that was our first exposure to the ideas about unschooling, and we were quite skeptical, I guess is the nicest way to put it at the time. And just, it's just so radically different than the schooling model, and certainly than the parenting model. And I know that I went into parenting with a very unrealistic expectation of what it would be like, and just seeing sort of the things that were a little bit hard or maybe inconvenient for you guys, like sleep and sort of not being able to have a full conversation with your friends. I was like, it's not going to be like that for us. And of course it was, just because that's the nature of having little kids. So once we had our first daughter, I think the game just totally changed for us. And we realized sort of we weren't going to just do the conventional things that made our life easier, because I guess they didn't make our life easier. It wasn't easier to try to put the baby in the crib and try to get her to sleep through the night. That ended up being harder. So sort of once that fell away, I think we started getting more open to different ideas about parenting and then different ideas about schooling and education and learning.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like, oh, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
It kind of sounds like you had a really, and obviously I was living right next to you while you were going through it, but even just listening to you explain it now in hindsight, it sounds like you had kind of a similar journey to me, which was like, this is what society has told me about raising, about having a baby and all of the things that I need to do to have my baby be well adjusted. And I'm trying all these things, but it's not like I want them to work because I think that's what I'm supposed to do, but it's really not working. And my instinct is telling me that I'm making it harder than it actually possibly needs to be. And maybe if I listen to my baby a little more and what my instinct is telling me, it could get a little bit more natural or easier.
Yeah, and what you're reminding me, Taylor, of a blog post I wrote for the woman who does evolutionary parenting on like the independence agenda, because I think I had that agenda for my baby that I just remember even from the first day she was born, I had in my head that I needed to like get her to sleep independently and not be so needy on me. And that is a really important cultural value in America that I had totally internalized. And so I'm not even sure that I had the instincts to go against that, but I just knew like my baby was not up for that. So right. I really had to do like that personal work to let that independence agenda go so that I could just attune to what my child needed in the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea, the independence agenda, because it really highlights, I think it's just a societal phenomenon, which is that society just sort of like quietly agrees on all of these little things that are the sign of good parenting. And so people will ask you about these things as you're going about your day-to-day life, right? If you have a baby on you, just how many people want to ask you, hey, is she sleeping through the night yet? And they want to check in on you to see if you checked that box off or something. And I don't think it's ever badly intentioned. I think it's just like a second nature sort of talking point. But I think a lot of times people also just don't realize that can be a pretty stressful question. Like say sleep isn't going very well, or, say, I can't think of any of these other questions off the top of my head, but basically if your kid is not checking those boxes on the time frame that society has for you, I feel like that can lead to a lot of insecurity. And I think the independence agenda is a strong, it's a strong idea for that, because I think it also comes along when it comes to like, oh, the kid is going off to school now. Mm-hmm. Are they like doing well in school? Are they, basically also just asking the parent, are you doing a good job is how I felt being asked.
Like the underlying message that if your kid is appearing to be independent, you've done a great job too.
Yeah, or like if you go someplace and the kid isn't asking you a lot of questions, let's say,
right.
Oh, she's so independent. Look at her just playing with blocks, letting us do what we want.
Right.
Not asking anything.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it also speaks to the idea that gets spread in our culture too, of like, that there's a norm for child development, and, whether it's from growth charts to sort of like language or interactional things. And I think my first child really forced me to reconcile with the idea that those are whatever, there may be the median or the average or whatever, but there's people all over the spectrum. And so some kids are going to be independent naturally, and some are going to be more needing of a parent's attention. So I was constantly comparing my child to the book. And as people like to say, she hadn't read the book. So she was just doing her thing and asking me for what she needed. And I was sort of saying, no, you're not supposed to need this because the book says you need this. I think it's still a process for me of letting the book go, letting the outside world go, and just tuning into what either of my kids need in the moment.
Yeah, I think it's also one of like a big hard thing for me, and I wonder if you experience this too, is I feel like you're also just a natural with kids. Like we all worked with kids in summer camp environments for quite a long time. And I know for me, feeling like I had a lot of confidence going into parenting, looking around being like, oh man, this is going to be a walk in the park.
I got this.
Yeah, I've worked with thousands of kids. Like, how hard is it? Kids like me. I'm just going to like play games and be silly and be a nice guy. And they're going to be so grateful that I'm their dad and not someone else. And I felt personally like really disappointed when I didn't feel like an awesome parent from the word go. Like I felt, I don't know, somehow great. And I wonder where that comes from.
Yeah.
Did you feel any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I stayed at home with my oldest for a year, and then I went to work in a high school with the kids experiencing some of the biggest challenges in high school. I was like a school social worker, essentially. And so I would sit with these kids who were suicidal, who had horrific family circumstances, and who were rude to me or disrespectful or whatever. And I could sit with them and be patient and calm. And then I'd come home to my sweet 2-year-old and she would do something annoying and I would lose my mind and become so angry and frustrated with her. And I was really blindsided by, like, why couldn't I control my emotions in the face of my child? So I think, just going back to what you said, James, like, there's the emotional attachment we have to our children is so much stronger than obviously we've had with anyone else. And that's amazing and beautiful. But I think it also makes it really hard for us to sort of manage our own emotions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%, because I think I can speak for myself and maybe Taylor here when I say that I experienced the exact same thing where, like, you know, when I worked with kids at camp, I would get all sorts of like compliments about how patient and respectful I was. And I remember there was this one incident where this kid it was like such a similar situation to what you described. There was a 6-year-old kid at camp who was physically punching me, and I was able to stay totally calm and just keep talking him through it and bring him back down to earth. And the counselors were like, I could just never imagine having that level of patience. And then I went home, and our oldest at the time, like, interrupted our conversations three times. And I just, like, absolutely lost my patience in a way that I wouldn't want to with anyone. And I was like, and then I went back down to camp. And as I was driving down, I was just feeling like this monster. Like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I separate? I mean, as a therapist, as a licensed mental health professional, can you reflect on why that might be? Is it the high stakes? Is it something going on with me? Or, like, do you have any sense for why that seems to be such a common phenomenon?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was when you were talking in the beginning was that we are attached to the outcome of how our kids turn out. Like, we want them to be happy and healthy individuals and so much more. We have just so many things we want for them. And I think in any moment where they're not being our preferred version of them, I guess I go to the place of, like, oh my God, like, what am I doing wrong? What's going to happen? Is my child going to turn into this? Are they going to be selfish? Are they going to be rude? Are they going to have no friends? All of those fears about the future. And also we blame ourselves and take ownership of our kids' behavior. And then on the other side, when you were saying, like, you felt like a monster in that interaction with your kid, I was just thinking about how we all have, like, these parts of ourselves that have, like, that kind of have the memory of things that we've gone throughout our lives, and they can get triggered at any given interaction. So while in the moment you were dealing with your kiddo, a part of you was probably kind of acting as if it were dealing with some other scenario from the past, and sort of like just having this automatic reaction to protect you, to help you feel safe and control, prevent you from becoming emotionally overwhelmed, whatever it might be. So I think it's like we're always kind of operating in the past and the future. And then that takes us out of the moment with our kid and out of, like, that kind of clear-headedness where you can say, oh, hey, buddy, like, we're having a conversation. Can you just wait 1 minute? Or I can see you really need to talk to me. Let me see if mom can wait a sec and I can hear what you're saying and then come back. Does that make sense?
It does. It's almost like we can stay so much more present. Like, when we talk about those of us who have worked with kids a lot, we can stay more present in the moment with other people's kids because we ultimately don't feel the responsibility for how that child turns out as an adult, or we're not kind of seeing it subconsciously as like a parallel to our own relationship with our own parents. We just kind of get to be in the moment with these other kids and do the best we can in the moment. But I think even just the ability to be present mitigates a lot of that kind of more reactive behavior when we get triggered.
Yeah, I think that's my experience. Like, the idea that kid goes home to somebody else takes a lot of the pressure away. And I think part of it where, like, I've talked about on the show before, where we're preparing to become parents far before we become parents and before we even realize it. Like, how many times do you sit there as a kid and you hear kids say something like, well, when I'm a parent someday, I'm not going to do this. Or when I'm a parent someday, my kid is going to be able to stay up as late as they want, you know? And people even say in arguments with their own parents. And so I think we build up, and I'm not a licensed mental health professional by any stretch, but I think for me, I can reflect and know that I built up that long list of, like, plans and dreams and also just hopes for how the relationship with my kids would look. And I think that did create expectations. Like if it wasn't going perfectly, and I hold myself to, I think, a pretty high standard for this. If it's not going perfectly, I have to fight back that instinct of like, oh, you're just doing all those things you said you would never do someday. Or just that feeling of shame almost of like, I plan to be a different parent than this. Why am I doing this now?
Yes.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about kind of how your parenting evolved when Anamika was a baby. And then when I kind of cut you off, when you were going to start talking a little bit about kind of like your educational choice and how you got there. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Like, it sounds like you kind of moved towards a more of like an attachment parenting lifestyle with your children when they were tiny. And now that Anamika is reaching more of a school age, what kind of has been your journey to an unschooling approach?
I think so. As Mika was little, maybe the first year or two, I started just becoming a little more open to homeschooling. I had never really wanted to do that because I never thought I would like it. And I also found the first year of parenting really, really hard. I felt like just pretty bored, I guess, if I'm being honest, of just being home with the baby. I also had a really hard time with not being in charge of my schedule and just having to kind of go with the flow of what the baby needed. So I really was not able to envision myself being the person that could stay home with the kids. My partner, Nick, was just kind of all in. And then when we moved back to Vermont, he was home with Mika and he just seemed to love it. So it started seeming like it could be an option because I thought Nick could stay home with the kids, and he wasn't really like career driven at that point. So that seemed like that might be a good fit for us. I could work and he could stay home. And I think just kind of going back, I think our friend Sabrina, Taylor, we were having a conversation with her once, and I was asking you guys what kind of drew you to unschooling and why you thought that was the best choice for your kids. And it really clicked with me when Sabrina said she had been seeing her daughter, who was maybe 3 at the time, just learning through everyday experience and being so creative and having a lot of passion and excitement around all different sorts of activities. And when Sabrina thought about what school would look like, she really felt like school would not be open to that. They would be sort of saying like, well, we're going to do this now and we're going to do it in this way. And she felt sad thinking about her child's sort of spark of interest and passion and creativity kind of being stifled in school. And that clicked with me. And as my kids got older, or I guess my oldest one got older, I started to see that same spark. And I think also as my daughter got to be maybe like 3 and 4, and we started doing things together like crafts or being outside together and kind of being able to enjoy some activities together, it became more foreseeable for me to like be home with them and be doing that. At the same time, I was listening to a lot of Pamela Recchia's Exploring Unschooling podcasts and diving really deep into what that lifestyle looks like and really starting to see the big picture of it being less about teaching or educating and more about being in relationship with your children. And also, I think being present in the world and recognizing the opportunities for even the adults to live and learn in a more free way. And that started feeling really appealing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think that mirrors a lot of people when they transition into this more self-directed or empowering our kids to be more self-directed. Now, you mentioned Nick sort of being all in early on. Was that did you guys arrive at these sort of decisions together? Was there anyone who had to like convince the other one to move in this direction? Or was it like, how did that look? Because I know a big question we get is, well, this sounds good to me, but like my partner doesn't seem in.
I think if anything, well, it's interesting. I feel like our whole relationship, Nick and I, has been this tag team. One person works and one person is pursuing something else. I'm going to grad school and Nick is working, and I'm having babies and Nick is working, and I'm working and Nick is staying with the kids. So I feel like we do a lot of tag teaming, and that's been sort of the process of us making these decisions. Like first Nick is sort of into the unschooling and homeschooling thing, and I'm a little more hesitant. Then I start diving in and learning. And now I feel like in a way I've got this almost deeper level of knowledge and awareness. And he's totally on board, but I still think he could even like dive deeper and get it more. He might contest that. He gets it. I think he gets it overall. But and
there's how much you can dive in and like go super deep listening to podcasts and like reading books and stuff. And then I feel like there's some amount of people who just like they just decide that it's a good idea and feel like they're good. They don't need to.
Yeah. And I love the podcast. I love the reading, and he's like listening to podcasts about other things and reading about other things. And so I think it's just more of like, it's an interest, I guess, of me to just be learning about this in a way that it's not so much of an interest for him to learn about it, but he likes to parent that way. So there honestly wasn't any convincing. I don't think we both just sort of over time and an openness to this idea. And I think we're both sort of unconventional in other ways, in lifestyle choices in other ways. We've sort of like moved away from what other Americans are doing. We have a tiny house. We have one car. My brother said at our wedding, our back porch looked like a recycling transfer station because we've been recycling anything and everything and composting. And so it's just like these other things that are kind of different than the way we grew up or the way that maybe other people in our culture are doing. So this was almost like a natural extension of just being conscientious and being willing to leave sort of the mainstream behind to pursue what felt authentic to us.
Sure.
I remember always feeling that way about you guys, actually. Like one of the things that you all did very early on that I remember being skeptical of was when you guys left college and went and lived in ski towns out west, right? And I remember thinking, well, that's not the thing that you're supposed to do after you graduate college. And feeling like really like concerned even. Man, Fiona's really smart. I didn't know think as well at the time. Fiona's like really smart. She's really going to go like,
oh my gosh,
ski town out west. And that was my inner voice. And then of course we skipped to the end where a year later, Taylor and I
we're doing the same thing.
Out west and living in ski towns too. But I think that it really helps. I mean, so I think the thing you guys probably had all along was this decision to live life, even if it was never spoken, this decision to live life intentionally and to try to make decisions that were going to be right for you, whether your friends and parents, whoever else were going to be judgmental of them or not. And so, you know, when you have that kind of decision-making process together, it makes sense that you would be on the same page, right? Because you're having conversations constantly and trying to live it.
And kind of having the like courage to step out of the box earlier on in your life before even becoming parents probably kind of like prepared you in a way and built a foundation of that being an okay way to live, right? Stepping outside of the box and trying something different once you did have kids.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about how, because I guess this is one thing I'm really curious about getting into the nitty gritty of your actual day-to-day work, because one of the things that I don't know if it's often an open criticism, but sort of an implicit criticism of unschooling or a self-directed approach to learning is that I have people wonder, well, how is that going to affect, you know, a kid's psyche? You know, how is that going to affect, like they're living so unusually? Is that going to make them self-conscious? Is it going to, you know, make them not turn out okay for some other reason? Maybe it's a lack of structure or something else. But as a licensed mental health professional, I'm sure this is something you must think about, right? Like how your parenting approach is going to affect your kids' mental health. So, you know, to try and segue into your work a little bit, does your field or do you, reflecting through that lens, does that inform your thoughts about parenting in any way? This is a really scattered question. If it doesn't make sense, I can clarify. But like, how do you reconcile your approach to parenting through your profession of being a mental health therapist?
Yeah, I'm just deciding what direction to go. Yeah. When you are a therapist, you sit with people who are coming to you because they're suffering. They're experiencing challenges and problems in their life, in their mood, in their relationships, whatever it might be. So even if you never read a book about a theory of how to help people change or, you know, why people suffer, I think you would inevitably see some patterns develop in sort of the stories that people come to you with. And I think a major theme that I've seen, and it's interesting because I saw this with one of my classmates. She was the first person I ever sat with in a counseling relationship. We had to do like pretend counseling with each other. Mm-hmm. And the theme was not being seen by her parents. And that was causing her a lot of suffering. And that theme comes up again and again. It comes up for me, like when I am a client in the therapy relationship is that we all want to be seen for who we are and be validated and accepted for who we are. And so I think my work has sort of solidified that we are making the right parenting choice, because I think that like seeing my kid for who they are and validating them for who they are has become one of the most important things I feel like I can do as a parent. Because I think if I do that for my child, then I give her the space and freedom to become who she is, and like sort of the safety to know that she's okay how she is, and she can kind of figure out the rest. Obviously with my support, it's the same thing I do for my clients. I'm there for them, I see them, and I validate them for who they are, and that gives them the security and the space and the freedom to look at changing or look at moving into who they want to be.
Yeah, so in some ways, you're saying that this whole approach prioritizes mental health outcomes over, say, academic outcomes or, whatever goals society has for kids. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, and I mean, I would say it prioritizes human wellness, it prioritizes relationships, and it prioritizes being connected with each other and pursuing joy. And I think those are ultimately what make people mentally healthy people. Mental health is sort of like a term that we created to define this, but when we think about what really leads people to feel like they are happy, they're healthy, they are whole, life will have suffering inevitably, but I think there's the suffering that life kind of imposes on you just by the nature of being a human, and then there's the suffering that you impose on yourself. I think this way of parenting helps people not impose suffering on themselves. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
No,
it really big ideas.
No, it really does make sense. And everything that you're saying just resonates so deeply with me because, I'm not a mental health professional, but what you said makes so much sense about seeing the pattern of people carrying this pain from not feeling like they've ever really been truly seen for who they are. And I can just think about conversations I've had with friends of mine and conversations I've had with kids or things people have said that reflect that here's this person who has spent so much of their life trying to be who other people think they should be instead of figuring out who they really are. And when you think about it that way, like, of course they're carrying all this pain. That's a really never being able to feel like you were yourself. And then as a result, never being able to fully actually even know who yourself is, right? Because you're trying to juggle all of these messages from other people has got to lead to some amount of challenges. So that really does resonate with me. And I think it also demonstrates for me kind of when you were talking about like the deeper understanding of the term unschooling, which take that term or leave it, but it really is about relationships and connection and joy because everything else kind of flows really in a healthy way if you can have that as your foundation.
Yeah. So let's have a follow-up question here because this is something that I struggle with sometimes. Obviously, humans are creatures of evolution, just like everything else. And when you dig into sort of like our evolutionary roots, it's not totally clear always how, like certainly kids in the past, Peter Gray has done a lot of work on how kids were mostly left to their own devices and they would go around and wander in these packs and kind of live in this quote unquote unschooled life in some ways. But parents during those times also were very free with, say, hitting their kids or certainly yelling at their kids. They weren't sitting there trying to be quote unquote peaceful parents. I don't think that was a top priority in the old days. As we're trying to figure out our approaches through this lens of mental health, what research do you trust, I guess? Like, so I know from being around you guys, I think you guys take a very, very peaceful approach with your kids. When you're thinking about like, I don't know, all these like little decisions around parenting, do you look towards the studies and your training as a mental health professional? Are you sticking with more like what feels right for you at the time? Do you ever have concerns that giving kids this much freedom and this much autonomy over their lives, like, is that too unusual? Will that lead to potential mental health outcomes that we don't want? I don't know. I guess to sum it all up, like, do you ever have any fear surrounding this approach, or are you feeling?
Yes, I do have fear, of course. This is so radically different from how I was raised. I will say it is radically different on the one hand. On the other hand, I found this book, Liberated Children, in my mom's bookshelf from the 70s. So in another way, it's not, I think it's tapping into an intuitive way of parenting that honestly was probably present from the earliest days of humans, but has been, shaped and twisted and turned into sort of mainstream parenting that looks totally different now. So as far as research about best outcomes, I think it's so funny. I think that's such like a 21st century way of parenting is like, well, research says to do X, Y, Z, and that will raise the blah, blah, blah type of child. And I think I guess in my own family, when I'm parenting, I don't think about research. I think about when I do have fear, I look at other kids. I think of all of the people I know in the world that have been raised all different ways. And I recognize that people have problems and people experience joy, and kids raised in all different types of all different types of families and parented in all different types of ways turn out lots of different ways. So I know kids that are raised, that go to school every day, but are parented in really peaceful ways and sort of seem like unschooled kids. They seem really self-assured. They interact well with grown-ups, and they just seem to be doing really well. So school is not necessarily evil or bad. Yeah. And then I know, kids who are homeschooled that seem totally off the wall. So I don't think that it's necessarily whether you send your kids to school or exactly what you do in any little given moment. I think it's having this foundation of trust and security and support and validation. And you're going to get it wrong. I'm going to get it wrong sometimes. So I think just building a relationship with my kids and trusting that no matter which way I choose, no way is going to be perfect. And I think our kids will turn out okay because we're being so intentional and so loving and so giving to them. Yeah. And they might still struggle. Like, that's the thing. They might have their own struggles, and that's not necessarily going to be because of how we parented. And also, we will never really know why they run into certain struggles. Some struggles might have a clear cause and effect, but others will be like sort of mystifying, I think.
I know, and it's so tricky. Like, I know for us, we often place the burden on ourselves when our kids are struggling, and we want to wonder, like, well, what could we have done differently to help our kid avoid this struggle or to have prepared them better?
Right. Can I just change something now to fix this?
It might be really hard. It actually reminds me, and you used the term perfect, remind me of that great, wonderful quote that I shared the whole Facebook universe from you in our One Free Family Facebook group, where you said, our children really need us to not be perfect. Imagine if they were, or if we were, they would have a whole set of other issues if they had parents that were perfect. And that really, I don't know, that struck me so deeply, because I think I actually do aspire to be a perfect parent, and while totally ignoring that could just be for my own vanity or something, and maybe not for the benefit of everybody involved. Because to just unpack like why you said that, because I have a bunch of thoughts about it, but I just thought that was such a powerful observation.
Yeah, and actually it was really powerful for me, and it came out of a conversation I was having with our next door neighbor, who were really close with this family that lives next door, but they parent very conventionally. So, but we talk about parenting a lot and sort of have these sort of debates and stuff. And I think I was also talking about the work that I've been doing lately with internal family systems, which is like a specific type of therapy. And I was reflecting on how a lot of the issues that people have are based on these wounds that they've gotten throughout life. And wounds can be severe, experiencing major early childhood trauma, or they can be small things like your parents controlling you more than you wanted to be controlled. So I was just saying to my friend how, like, well, now that I believe that, it's like, how do I not wound my kid? And my friend was like, well, you're gonna, like, there's no way you cannot, like, you're not perfect. And he's like, that'd be terrible if you were perfect. And I was like, wait, what? Hold on. Like, because I do think that the peaceful parenting and unschooling thing on a level, and maybe it's like the upper level getting it, but not quite the enlightenment level of getting this approach, is like, it is this aspiration to be perfect and to be these like sort of angelic like parents that can just be calm and peaceful and thoughtful and really provide what their kids need in any given moment. And we just can't do it. I mean, it's just impossible. So, and yeah, if we did, like, that would be so much pressure for our poor children. Because I know what I sort of needed as a kid that I didn't feel free enough to do was actually to like lose my shit and like have a tantrum and freak out and stomp and scream. And in my family, everybody's really reserved. And I think my parents really prioritized kind of like holding yourself together and like getting through stuff with like a calm demeanor. So, you know, now I reflected on that and like, oh, okay, so my kid just kind of needs to lose it sometimes. And part of the way she can know that that's okay is when I kind of lose it sometimes. And I can say, oh, sorry, like, I have this part of me that just like blows its top every once in a while. And I'm trying to work with that part. Do you have that part? Yeah, I have that part. We've started calling it our growly part. It kind of comes out and growls and snaps at people when we get angry. And it's helping us. It's trying to help us feel safe, but it doesn't always interact very nicely with other people.
I love that so much. I love thinking about you kind of supporting her through that by helping her to identify that like, it's a part of her. It's not who she is. And that it also sounds like you're making it sound like in some ways it's an important part of her because it is the part of her that wants to keep her safe and that she doesn't have to feel ashamed for having a part of her like that. But also how can we recognize how it might affect other people? Like it just seems like a really healthy approach for her. So she's not carrying shame for having those really big feelings.
Yeah, totally. And we all have that array of these parts that sort of you've experienced it all the time, and you probably think this way, like, well, a part of me wants to be calm and collected, but then a part of me really wants to tell this person off or whatever it might be. We're not like a unitary self. We have sort of different little sub-personalities that interact with each other in the world, and getting to know them and sort of understanding yourself through that lens, I think helps you feel safe more, and also like build relationships in a way that values yourself and also values others.
Right. It's like that deeper level of self-knowledge from which you can operate. Yeah. And I agree with you. Like if I've thought about that before, if our kids never, I'm always careful not to use it as an excuse to lose my cool on my kids more than I want to, but if our kids never experience us struggling with big emotions or making mistakes, I think about like what happens when their parents one day and they feel frustrated and lose their cool and they've never seen us do it. They might think something is terribly wrong with them, right? That's a lot of pressure. I kind of have another question that wasn't planned.
Or you just could follow up.
It's still a part of a follow-up.
Okay,
so this might be kind of self-serving, but you were talking about how your daughter sometimes has that anger that she expresses and how in your family as a kid you felt like it was not okay for you to do that. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you make space for your daughter to do that? And at the same time, because I know like we have one of our kids who kind of goes to that place a lot more quickly than the other ones. And I want him to feel safe to do that. But I also want him to understand when it crosses over into like mistreating other people or being inconsiderate of how it's affecting other people. And that's something that I really struggle with. And I imagine other people do too. Like, how do I support my kid to lose it and also have boundaries around how they treat everybody?
Yeah, I think this is probably an area that I struggle with the most because it's something that bothers me in the moment. But also I think the biggest thing that bothers me is like the fear that my kid might not grow out of this. It's like, well, now my kid's 5 and there's still hitting that happens. They're still yelling. They're still just being mean to her sister or me or dad. And so I definitely I have this sort of fear, like this is never going to end. And who will my child be? And I think when I'm operating from that place, I parent in a way that's trying to control and change the behavior. And that doesn't ever really work very well. I started doing therapy myself as a client in the last couple months. And this was something that I was talking to my therapist about and saying, like, I get angry with my kid because she gets angry, and we get kind of locked in this. And through the process of doing some therapy and gaining this insight about me never having been able to express that as a child, I sort of, in a way, unlocked some freedom, I say, for myself to be able to just allow that anger. And so I think what I try to do is manage the environment. So that might mean moving other people to a different room, or moving my daughter who's experiencing anger to another room, and then just being with her. Mm-hmm. And a lot of just repeating what she's saying, reflecting, like, you're really frustrated, you seem really angry, you really wanted to do that. And on my best days, just sitting with her until it passes. And also knowing that I don't actually have to be the one that figures out how to get her out of it.
Yeah, that's huge.
You know, sometimes we've sat with it for a while and I've said, what would help you move on right now? Or like, what do you think you need to come eat breakfast or whatever? And often she'll come up with the answer, and it might not be what I think is the best thing, but it works for her. I think when it's like a calmer time, I think I'm using that parts language so that she is knowing that, like, it's just a part of her. I recognize that part has a purpose for her. I want her to recognize that part has a purpose. And also saying, if that part wasn't so busy, like growling at other people or telling you to hit other people or kick other people, is there something else that part would want to do? Is there another way it can help you feel safe or help you? It seems to want to help you get what you want. Yeah, did that actually help you get what you want? No, it didn't. So maybe there's another way. So just kind of having those conversations in a calm moment and hoping that just watching us be peaceful and just with some maturity and development, this stuff will pass.
Yeah, this conversation really, the word that keeps coming to mind for me is the idea of shame. And I think, you know, I've talked to a lot of people in my work at summer camp, and my own kids, and through volunteer work elsewhere. And I feel like so many people, including myself, struggle with this feeling of like, if people knew the real me, they would like me less. If they knew everything about me, the thoughts that were in my mind, all the parts of me, they would like me less. And that's why when you really get to know someone on a really deeper level, there's this like, it's like the first time you cry in front of someone, you know, and then you wake up the next day and you're still friends. That can be like a really satisfying feeling in some ways, because it's like, oh, you saw this new part of me that most people don't get to see in our culture, and you still love me. And I think with our kids, we have a huge opportunity to connect with them after moments like that. And Taylor talked about, you know, our one son who's suffering from really exploding at people from time to time. But like a week ago, someone else was exploding, and I was, you know, probably not handling it as well as I could have. And then he stepped in and said, it's okay to be sad sometimes. And
the one who typically struggles stepped in and said that. Yeah.
And that's what he's been told, mostly by Taylor, who's really good at helping him through moments like that. But it struck me that he was hearing that he wasn't, even though sometimes I probably project this idea that it's not okay to act that way, even though I don't want to all the time, that he's still hearing that that part is okay, that there's nothing to be ashamed of. And I think that's why that whole concept around not presenting ourselves as perfect to our kids, I think it's still okay to keep working towards that. And I'm happy to model for my kids that I am working on it and I am trying to improve. But when we present ourselves as perfect, I think we can create this unrealistic ideal. And I think that's where a lot of parenting books and parenting podcasts, frankly, and a lot of people in the conversation around parenting can fall short, because like I'm even reminded of the concept of like unruffled parenting that our friend Jake talked about with us when he interviewed us for his show, The Voluntary Life, and this idea that like our kids should never see us lose our cool, basically. That didn't sit well with me, probably just because I didn't want to admit to myself that I lose my cool more than is probably even still optimal. But I still think that concept of like our kids seeing us as perfect, like if you never see your parents go through any specific struggle, when you struggle, I feel like you'll feel isolated.
Yeah, what kind of roadmap do you have then?
Right. You've never seen anyone process those emotions. You've never seen anyone work with it. But anyway, I just wanted to really, thank you for that super powerful insight, because I think so many of us along this path of trying to parent more intentionally, we hold up and we're like, man, if only my kids had Pam Laricchia as a mom, they would like probably be so happy and be like working on crafts and not yelling at me about or hitting their brother. And that's not the case, and I don't think she would say that was the case either, but it can feel that way sometimes.
Yeah. And I just want to highlight for our listeners, I think just quickly pull out some of the things that you said, because we get a lot of people talking about challenges in dealing with, especially toddler or a little bit older, 4, 5, 6-year-old, 3 even, behavior that is challenging, like hitting and yelling and losing their cool and explosive reactions to things. And so I think some of the things, I think you probably just offered people a lot of really great tools and ideas. And some of the biggest things that I take from it are being able to react out of a place of like mindfulness and presence instead of fear for the future, right? And then also, you didn't specifically say this, but we say this all the time, and you kind of alluded to it. The idea of parenting in this way is kind of a long game. And just because we can get to the place of responding mindfully and being with our children through these hard moments, it doesn't mean it's going to go away. It doesn't mean it won't happen again in 4 days, but it means that we are being there with them and we're not giving them that extra layer to deal with, which is the shame, right? And that over time, we're trusting that being with them in the hard moments and then talking with them about it when things are calm is going to form kind of the way that they deal with their emotions as they get older.
Yeah. And I guess just to add a few more concrete things to the list of like dealing with hitting and stuff. I do think safety is number one. So certainly if your kid's hitting another kid, I'd say you have to make sure everybody can be safe. And sometimes for us, that does look like moving the person that's hitting. Yep. Sometimes it looks like moving the person being hit. It's sort of whatever makes sense in the moment. And we try to be as peaceful and gentle as we can about that. I also think that if you listen to Pam Laricchia, every episode that's sort of the advice episode, they come back and say, pay attention to what's going on with your kid. Be with your kid more, connect with them more. And I just think that in itself is a tall order. As a parent, I've got so much stuff going on in my head, whether it's what's going to be for dinner, or are we going to be able to afford a bigger house, or what do I have to do for work tomorrow? So I can easily become distracted and not be spending time with my kid, even if we're home together all day. So I think when your kid is displaying these behaviors, it's they're needing something. And you might not ever actually figure out what that is, but I think by being close with them and connecting with them and being nearby, first of all, you can head things off a little bit more if you're nearby. And also you're just connecting with them and getting to know them and having peaceful and loving time with them that's not fraught with all of this intervention. So that's something I feel like when in doubt, connect with your kid, and I need to kind of remind myself of that often.
Sure.
But I appreciate that you also acknowledge that there's room to take grace with ourselves and understand that the stresses of being an adult are also significant and real. And I feel like sometimes one thing I really love about our One Free Family parenting group, more so than some other parenting groups I found on Facebook and elsewhere, is when something's wrong with your kid, sure, you connect with your kid, you can do more with them, but it's not your fault, you don't have to be sitting there beating yourself up or constantly moving the goalposts for yourself, where you're okay, well, next week I'm going to connect with my kid 50% more, even around all the other things and priorities I have in life. And then if it's still hard, I feel like you can walk up to people and describe that and they'll say oh, well, you probably just needed to connect even more. At some point, you're dealing with a dynamic, one-of-a-kind person who's going to have, no human being is designed with DNA to never go through hard times, to never hit, to never yell at anyone or anything like that. And not necessarily a reflection of you as being a bad parent. And so all at once recognizing, okay, this doesn't mean I'm a bad parent that this is happening. And I probably can still try something new and keep working on it. I don't know, allowing it to be hard without beating yourself up.
Well, and I think a lot of times, like you said, Fiona, the something new can be as simple as just go connect with your kid a little bit more. I sometimes think what's the next best step I can take here instead of getting caught in this pattern? And for me, that looks okay, my kid is exploding quite often these days. I could either go into a spiral of fear about his future and just become more and more disconnected from him because I'm spending all my time worrying about who he's going to be. Or I could just simply try to load my days up with more connection with him when things are calm even, and which way it's pretty clear when I hold those two things together, which one of those is a better use of my time. So I think you're right. Like, I don't think you can go wrong if you just connect more.
Love it. Can we jump into one more question? I know we're really low on time here, but we did have a question from our group when we alerted people to the idea that you'd be on the show. And this came from Jenica. She said, I love a pro to weigh in on what healthy boundaries for mama needs some alone time look like. So, when you're in a parenting situation like this, but you do just need some space, do you have a sense of what a healthy or kind way to do that is?
Yeah, I was reflecting on this, and I wasn't quite sure if she was just looking for some language or looking about how to get that time for herself. But I guess my answer would address either of those. And I think I had thought about sort of the characteristics of a healthy system, and families are systems. Humans, individuals are systems. So having a healthy system, there's 4 things that are important: balance, harmony, leadership, and development. So I think a healthy system is a system where there's balance. Everybody is getting their needs met and supporting each other to meet their needs. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with harmony, kind of working together. Leadership is having sort of some people in the system that are in a leadership role, which in a family is naturally the parents. Mm-hmm. And development, I really like that because I think it points to the fact that like our kids and us are constantly developing. So there will be growth and development throughout our lives together. And so I think just honoring like the balance and harmony piece as the parent, first of all, you are part of the system. You're not outside of it. So it's not how do I get balance and harmony and support my kids to be happy and healthy. It's how do we all work together to support each other. And so I think using that language with your kids from the earliest days and with your partner and just talking it through about, I really like to go for walks. And it seems like you guys aren't interested in that. So I would like to make some time for myself to go for a walk. I need some time alone, or I have these things I'm interested in doing. It's okay to need alone time. And I think just talking with your kids and your partner about that is totally okay. I think
I want some alone time. That doesn't sound like, 'cause I don't know. I have this weird baggage from when we all worked at camp and we were taught not to tell the kids that we needed to go on a break. And I feel like I hear that voice, our beloved mentor, Howard Miller, saying like, we don't want kids to think that we need a break from them. Like, I feel like maybe there's some of that in this question. How do you advise, communicate to our kids that like how alone time recharges us, or how we
without it feeling like a slight to them?
Yeah, without them feeling like, well, I'm the one that makes daddy drained. I'm the one that,
right.
That's interesting. I don't have that baggage.
That's good.
I talk with my kids, and I remember, when my oldest daughter was maybe 3 or so, my parents were coming to visit, and Nick and I had planned to go out to a concert, and she was a little bit sad about it. And I said, parenting is hard work. We work really hard to stay calm and patient, and we do lots of things for you guys, and we really enjoy it. And sometimes we need some time just to be with each other. The next week or so, she was just kind of talking about that. Parents like to go on dates. Sometimes they need some time just to each other. It was fine. It didn't have a negative connotation in her mind. I mean, she was sad that we left her because she was young and more comfortable with us, but I think she also understood it. I think the key is also like, if you're getting to a point where you're really frazzled and like, Mama just needs some alone time, right. That's a lot different than kind of, I think, including your kids in the process and saying, okay, what do we have on tap for today? Or what's our plan for the week? And saying like, well, I really want to do this thing, and kind of asking for the kids' input and being transparent. And I don't know if that was right at camp, James, that we were, I think the other thing we would say now is we don't like lying to our kids. So,
right.
Well, we expressly told people at Vander Camp to let people know, like, when Vander Camp was the camp that we all worked together after that initial camp, and to let people know, like, I need some time to recharge. And one of the things I would talk to them about is like, just explaining the realities of working a job and needing to have some time for self-care and
simply taking a shower, right?
Well, like taking a shower, and just like maybe I just want to go talk to my girlfriend on the phone right now, and like just being, again, I guess it's back to your perfection thing. It's like being a real person. Like, like I'm just someone, and I also, what I like about what you're saying too, is I feel like it helps our kids gain a realistic and loving sense of what a relationship should look like. Because I know when I really reflect on what's going on inside of myself, when someone wants time and they definitely don't want me around, I can take that personally, right? And I've worked on this quite a lot.
Oh yeah, me now too.
Where I don't really care. Like if Taylor wants to go have some time with like some other friends of hers in the area and I'm not invited, I'm not like sitting there like I would have been in high school or maybe in college being like, why doesn't Taylor want me to come? Why does she need to go out away from me? Does she not like me anymore? You know? All of these like weird little devils on my shoulder that want to make it about some fault of my own rather than the needs of the other person, right? So establishing that as a healthy way for people to coexist really early on.
Yeah, and I think also just maybe explaining what you're going to do. Like, maybe you're going to go read a book and ask, sort of saying like, well, is that something you would really want to do? Or like, do you really want to go out and like have a glass of wine with me and my girlfriends and sit at a restaurant and like have grown-up conversations? Not you, James. I know you would like that.
I would like to have grown-up conversations, please.
But, I think talking to your kids and being like, you have some things you like to do that I'm not that interested in. And I have some things that I like to do that maybe you're not that interested in. And that's okay. We have lots of things that we like doing together and some things that we like doing apart, and just normalizing that. I think is great.
And I love the distinction that you made between like getting to that point of feeling really frazzled and kind of exploding about needing alone time versus, which we've all been there, and let's not carry shame around it, but also the distinction between that and then actually developing, when you call it a system, like developing a family system where people's needs are being met and discussed about and collaborated around how to meet them for everybody. Like that often actually wards off hitting that point of overwhelm and being really frazzled. So I think that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah. I also love just helping our kids to gain a really authentic understanding of how others work and how we work, and giving them an insight to who we are, because I think that can lead to connectedness. Like I remember talking to our oldest son a few nights ago because he's been having difficulties around sleep from time to time. And anyway, we were talking and I was expressing why my time alone at night is important to me. And I just said, it's not about being away from you. It's about being away from everyone. Because for me, the way I recharge, it's almost like needing a drink of water or having a bite to eat. Part of me feeling like whole and content and happy is taking some amount of time every single day where it's just me with my thoughts doing something I want to do. And I think that helped him to see that I wasn't upset with him specifically for, needing this additional attention at nighttime. It was more about just me needing just space from everyone, for that introverted part of myself. We want to use that language too. But yeah, I think I love everything you're saying. Hopefully, Jennifer, that will be helpful for you if you're out there listening. So,
we should probably wind down, although we could keep talking forever.
I know.
Before we do, is there anywhere that people can find you online? Like if people wanted to follow up on anything you said or learn a little bit more about you and your work, is there anywhere that they can go?
Yes, I have a website. It's Fiona Griffin Counseling. And there's an email. It's FionaGriffinCounseling@gmail.com. Do you want me to spell that, or can we put it in the show notes?
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. I think if you Google that, you'll find me.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's a contact form there, and then you can also my email is just FionaGriffinCounseling@gmail.com.
Cool. And you're also in our One Free Family Facebook group, and I'm sure.
Yeah. And I do have a Fiona Griffin Counseling Facebook page too. So you could send me a message there. I just don't do much with it.
Okay.
Right on.
Well, thank you so much, Fiona. I feel like this was a really awesome and exciting way to kick off some new episodes that we're going to be doing, where we interview people and just get some perspectives on here besides our own. And I feel like your insights and also some concrete ideas that you've shared are just going to be really meaningful for a lot of people. So thank you just for taking time to be with us.
Yeah, they helped me too, which is always really
Good. Yeah. Thank you guys. It's been a pleasure to talk to you as always.
Awesome.
Thanks, Fee. And I guess that means we're signing off, right? So just thank you, everybody, again, for being on this journey with us. And remember that each moment is a new opportunity to be the parent that you hope to be.
Like I always say, love you guys. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to One Free Family. If you enjoy the podcast, please show your support by becoming a patron at onefreefamily.com/support. Your support will help make this show better. Plus, you can get access to rewards and additional episodes by joining. Again, that's onefreefamily.com/support. This has been a Pax Libertas Productions podcast.